Hello, this is Joe Markowitz with today's Liberty Dispatch. Good to be with you again. Um, my objective in our Liberty Dispatches is not to push uh, topics that are just political topics. I've always wanted to educate people, comment on the American exceptionalism, our Constitution, our religious liberty, our freedom of speech, our freedoms that are guaranteed in our Constitution, the First Amendment, the Second Amendment. I want to talk about the principles of freedom. I always want to do that, but now today, obviously, if you have eyes to see and ears to hear, there is an incredible push to insert a very evil, socialistic, or Marxist type of agenda on America, to challenge all of our freedoms. Our religious liberty especially is under threat today. I'll talk about that in a minute with this Equality Act. And also, I'm really disgusted at the cronyism and the corruption coming out of Washington, D.C. We have walls built around Washington, D.C. now, around our Capitol right now, to do what? To keep America out. You have our president that was inserted on January 20th, signing record number of executive bills. He's not gonna use legislation. No, he's going to use executive orders more than any other president in recent history. It's on and on. It's speaking about walls around Washington, D.C. and around our Capitol. How about the walls that are now open? The southern borders now open through executive orders. Tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of immigrants being let into this country. And being inserted and spread out through all the heartland, being told that, hey, you need to show up in court, but that won't be for 2 to 3 years from now because we have such a backlog. How many of those people are ever going to show up in court? You know what this is all about. This is about challenging the sovereignty of our country. I'm really concerned about two major pieces of legislation this week that have been through the House. One is this $1.9 trillion COVID emergency bill that had passed the House. From what I see, this is not opinion. This is fact. You wonder why they had to pass this thing in the middle of the night, because they don't want Americans knowing about it. It is just more pork. It is more corrupt cronyism. It has very little to do with COVID emergency relief. In fact, they haven't even spent last year's $1 trillion that is still sitting there unspent. This is about getting codified in law all kind of pet projects for these crony politicians up in Washington, D.C., and every American citizen should just be pissed off about it. While we're out here, small businesses are out here, people are out here struggling, people are losing jobs, people are still having to wear masks. Yes, there's vaccinations, but then when you're vaccinated, you say, well, you still have to wear a mask, you still have to be 6 feet apart, you still can't do this, still can't do that. What do you believe? And meanwhile, they're just spending money like crazy up in Washington, D.C., executive orders by President Biden. And then you see this $1.9 trillion with a T, emergency, COVID emergency fund. And don't take my word for it. Let me just give you a few. Look it up for yourself. Learn how to think for yourself. Do your own research. How about this one? What in the world does a minimum wage hike have anything to do with COVID relief? It's just a pet project of the left. There's not a single credible economist out there that says that raising the national minimum wage would have any positive effect in our economy. Not a single one credible out there. Yes, it may help some people, but many economists believe that somewhere between 1 to 2 million jobs would be lost because of this. It is absolutely insane. What does it have to do with COVID relief? How about $1 billion in this bill, this $1.9 trillion bill? $1 billion compared to $1 trillion or $2 trillion, it's a drop in the bucket. But you might say, where are they getting this all the money? Just print more of it. Just print it. Just print it, tax the people more. $1 billion to socially disadvantaged farmers and ranchers. What does that have to do? Well, what does that mean to begin with? To me, I think it's more left-leaning, progressive, special projects, so usually race-based, identity group, special projects, socially engineering, re-engineering this country and our economy. What does that have to do? What are socially disadvantaged ranchers and farmers anyway? I just want to know. That's in the bill. $500 million, $500 million with a B, towards art museums. What does that have to do with COVID emergency relief? How about tens of millions of dollars in this bill for Planned Parenthood and other abortion projects? Tell me, what does that have to do with COVID emergency relief? You know the answer. You know it as well as I do. How about this one? Okay, don't take my word for it. Go check it out for yourself. This is Pelosi's pet project. $100 million. $100 million allocated for an underground rail system, I should say, in San Jose, California. And oh, by the way, that won't even be done until 2030. What does that have anything to do with COVID emergency relief? You know the answer to that. $670 billion on projects that won't even start until 2022 or 2024. I could go on and on and on. You check it out for yourself. I am ticked off about it. I hate it. I hate what's happening up at the federal level. But I will tell you this. The more people are educated, the more people who care and learn how to speak back and push back, I think in the long run, we put pressure on politicians and they'll know we're out here. And they'll stop trying to pass bills in the middle of the night. Speaking about passing a bill in the middle of the night, the Equality Act. The Equality Act passed the House this week, going to the Senate. This is anything but an Equality Act. It sounds very good. Who doesn't want to believe in equality? Let's talk about a real, legitimate Equality Act. It was called the 1964 Civil Rights Bill. Now, this 1964 Civil Rights Bill was, which basically said this: you cannot be discriminated against based upon race, color, or creed. That makes sense. That is biblical. That is the right thing to do. But this Equality Act now wants to amend that 64 Civil Rights Bill by now inserting sexual discrimination. You know, and basically approving now that people who I and you may disagree with morally, religiously, we don't hate them, we're not against them, but we disagree with them, but we will be forced to hire them. Let me go even further. I think that this Equality Act, if you really look at it, is really another Trojan horse for an anti-religious act. More specifically, anti-Christian bill. It puts in tremendous amount of pressure on private institutions, religious universities, high schools, pre-K, privately funded companies, privately owned companies, private institutions, private organizations, that if they do not hire or force a curriculum, if we do not change our curriculums to reflect what is religiously and morally abhorrent to a very large part of our population, which, by the way, our religious liberty is protected in our Constitution. Protected. First Amendment. Absolutely. And so what this does, without getting into the gory details, it puts tremendous pressure on religious institutions that they would be so afraid if they don't change their curriculums, agendas, or hire a certain number of people out of this class, out of this fringe class. then these institutions can lose their tax exempt status, can lose their accreditation if they're a school, especially colleges. So you lose your accreditation as a college, you've lost it all. It's done. But the heavy hand of the government to push these radical social programs on our population at the expense of a significant part of our population and the rights of people who have our religious liberty protected in the Constitution to protect us, okay? And we may lose those. We may lose those rights. We may lose a way to make money. We may lose our curriculums, which we believe are morally, biblically based, especially when it comes to a Christian university, a Christian high school, pre-K, or something like that. This Equality Act also forces, it basically destroys women's sports. I don't want to get too deep into that, but when you force women's sports to accept biological males, you destroy the women's sports. When you force biological males to be able to go into women's locker rooms and all that, I mean, really, this is so unbelievable. I just hope we wake up from this bad nightmare. It also makes it very difficult to convict people that are guilty of pedophilia, or at least accused of pedophilia. Very, very hard to convict them. It goes on and on and on. How about a doctor who, based upon his own personal moral or religious belief system, does not want to perform abortions? And today, that is protected. That is protected. But because of part of this Equality Act, it'll be a national abortion mandate, which would force that doctor, even against his or her own personal, moral, religious convictions, to perform that abortion. This is just flat out wrong. And I hope that the senators, enough senators, stand up against this, because it already passed the House. It would write down party lines. Well, I won't say that. There were a couple of Republicans, I don't even call them Republicans, that voted with the Democrats for it in the House. I just pray that our senators say this is just absolutely incredible. I think the only way it'll get passed in the Senate is if the Democrats push to get rid of the filibuster, which they've threatened all along. This a very traditional process, the filibuster, to protect government or one party in the government from pushing upon the opposing party, opposing people in government, certain radical laws or agendas. If they get rid of the filibuster, if they find a way to do it, to be able to get this thing through, then we may have this Equality Act. And God help us. I mean, really it is. We will lose our religious liberty in this country. So enough for today. I just want to be able to share with you that while some of these topics are very disturbing, this is happening all the time. I mean, political correctness, wokeism. It seems like the left is very empowered today to go after who? People like me. People like me who have religious convictions. I'm a believer. I'm a Christian. To small businesses, I believe small businesses are being crushed. I believe patriots are absolutely being canceled. They're being doxxed. They're being threatened. Christians, I believe, are being persecuted like never before. I think churches are under a lot of pressure right now. So it is time for us to stand up and say no. All right. The way I do it, I try to educate you. I try to teach you the principles of freedom, our Constitution, who we are as Americans, American culture, American exceptionalism, our rights as Americans. And so they're under attack right now. So we got a lot of work to do. So until next time, this is Joe Markowitz with your Liberty Dispatch. I can't wait to talk to you again very, very soon.